Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Microsoft Reactor live stream event. We are very excited to have Maggie Markson joining us today. She is a software engineer here at Microsoft, and she'll be presenting Azure AD B2C, which is focused on cybersecurity solutions. This session will run for approximately 45 minutes, and there'll be time for questions toward the end. Feel free throughout the presentation to drop your question into the chat. Maggie probably will save them for the end. If she gets to them sooner, we get to them sooner, but just keep that in mind. Also to note, there is a bit of a delay between our recording and it reaching your ears, the audience, so probably about 20 to 30 seconds. So if you do ask questions at the very end, there may be a bit of a delay before Maggie is able to answer them as well. So again, just as they come up, feel free to drop them in there and we'll have them ready for the conclusion. Additionally, please be aware that this will be recorded and we will have that available probably in about 7 available on our YouTube channel, which I will share the link to our YouTube. And then just again, thank you for taking part in this event. The Reactor program is always striving for new and engaging content. We're always looking to get more engagement with the community. So at the conclusion, I will also be sharing a survey. If you can fill that out, give us feedback, let us know what you're hoping for future Reactor events. At this time, I'm going to give the floor to Maggie to begin. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for your introduction, Rebecca. My name is Maggie Markson, and I work for Microsoft in the cybersecurity solution area, which is divided into security and identity, and I work on the identity team. Today, I will be talking about Azure AD B2C. The purpose of B2C is to integrate multiple identity providers and to provide a single trusted identity provider and to customize user flow. B2C allows for external accounts, such as social media, to work as logins to an application. B2C is an independent service that allows for users to log in through other identity providers, but an identity token is created within Azure B2C for use in other Azure AD tenants. This differs from Azure AD B2B, or business to business, which is a feature of Azure AD, where external customers can be invited as guests, and they do not need to have Azure AD managed logins. This is a familiar login screen you might recognize, where you can either create a local account, forget a password for your local account, create a new local account, or sign in with a social account. These are some configured identity providers for this example. Following this presentation, if you would like to learn more about Azure AD B2C, you can follow this link to Microsoft Learn, where there's really great lessons on it. So now we're going to go over into the Azure Portal to look into setting this up. So we're going to start by creating a resource. So here I am on the Azure Portal homepage. So create a resource, and then we're going to search for B2C. And then click Create. So step 1 is to create a new tenant. Here you can give it an example organization name. We'll call this example demo. And then here you pick an initial domain name. So this is where it will appear as whatever we type here, .onmicrosoft.com. We'll call this one B2C demo test tenant. The country region we select determines which location, which data center location our information will be stored. So I'm now creating my tenant. Following this step, we need to administer the tenant. So we'll go back to the Azure Portal homepage. And we're going to link the tenant we just created. Create resource, search again for B2C, and then click create. So now we're going to link an existing Azure AD B2C tenant to my Azure subscription. So this is the one we just created, B2C demo test tenant. And here I connect it to a subscription and select a resource group, which I've already created. Now the tenant creation was successful. If we want to switch directory, which I'm currently in my default directory, but I've created a couple other directories, here's where we do that switch. I'm going to switch to this other directory where I've done some work in. So now we're going to set up B2C for this other directory and tenant. So I'm on the Azure Portal homepage again, and I'm going to search for B2C. First, we're going to look into setting up the identity providers. Here we have the list of identity providers. The first one we're going to look into is local account. So if we configure local account setup for this tenant, it's important to note that the identity exists only in this B2C tenant. Here you can select if you would like users to create their account using a username, an email, or both. Now we're going to look into Google as an identity provider example. If we want to look more into how to fill out this information, which I've already registered, we can go into the documentation right here. So the Learn More link goes to these documents. It's important to note that these first steps are done in the Google Developers Console. And in these steps is where you'll create a client ID through the Google App Setup, as well as details including the client secret, which will be needed in later steps. The later steps here are done in the Azure portal back at the page we were just at. Once you do the Google App Developer Setup, you get this client ID and a client secret, and here's where you can configure it in the Azure portal. It's important to note also that I've already configured some of these for this demo tenant. So the ones that show over here, like here it shows the name Facebook, that means I've already configured it, versus if you notice it doesn't say Amazon over here, because for this example tenant, I have not yet configured that. So what happens if I want to add a provider that is not in the list here? As long as that other identity provider supports OIDC, we can click up here into New OpenID Connect Provider. This is how you would add an Azure Active Directory tenant. One example situation where you would use this is if you have a corporation that wants employee credentials from their employee Azure AD tenant to log in here. So an employee can use the storefront for their corporation using a special employee-specific login. And here it needs a little more information, and you can also click into the documents here to get some information about setting that up. Next, we're going to look into user flows. So I'm going to click on user flows on the left over here. What is a user flow? A user flow is a predefined policy for user interaction with B2C. Here are the user flow types available. If you notice here, there's a sign up and sign in, but there's also a separate sign up and sign in. Why would you want to separate flows for sign up and sign in? For example, if you don't want users to be able to sign up, so if you're creating the accounts programmatically, like through an invitation, and you are not concerned that we have a combined flow for signing up and signing in, because in that example, if they're created programmatically, you would only need the sign in functionality. We also have profile edit, where a user can configure their user attributes, password reset, and it's important to note that this password reset is only resetting passwords for local accounts. So if we have an identity provider configured, for example, Google, this would not affect their password reset for Google. We can only do local accounts here. So now we're going to look into sign up, sign in a bit more. So here we'll give it a name. This example, B2C1 Susie, is actually what I've already used and configured for this app. So it's giving me an error, but you'll need this name later. Here you can select the identity providers. It's important to note that you can only sign up with the identity providers that you've added in the previous step. So these are the social identity providers that I have configured in the last step, and I have configured local accounts. It's important to note about the multi-factor authentication step that it is another step, which could potentially result in MFA twice locally, once here if you select it to be on, and again through the identity provider if the identity provider also has MFA set up, which a lot do. The next step is conditional access, which we will cover in a bit. And user attributes and token claims. So attributes are bits of information on a user's profile, also known as claims. If we click on the collect attribute for one of these attributes here, we are going to prompt the user for it during signup. And if we select to return the claim, then we are going to, it is included in the identity provider. The show more shows out of the box attributes, and we will talk more later about adding custom attributes. So collect attributes are filled in the prompts from the user, and application tokens are what are returned and sent in the token. So since I already have created a sign up, sign in for this tenant, we're going to click out of it and go back into the Azure AD B2C homepage. Going to go back into the user flows, and now we're going to look more into the profile edit user flow. So similarly, you'll want to name this something along the lines of profile edit, which I've already used. And then here you select the identity provider similarly to sign up, sign in. MFA, conditional access, back down to user attributes. So for profile edit, the collect attribute tells us on this left side is what we want them to be able to edit, and the right side is what is returned in the B2C identity token. So you may check one, but not the other. For example, if you're getting the information from upstream rather than prompting for it, is why you would not want to prompt for it, but instead you just want to send it upstream. So we're going to look more into these user attributes and click show more. Here are all the user attributes that are out of the box and including the custom ones that I've created for this example tenant. So here's where you'd want to select additional ones. We will talk later about adding custom attributes. So now back to the B2C homepage, and we're going to look more into custom attributes and user attributes. So click on user attributes here. And now we're going to add one. For example, we'll add favorite color. Here where you select the data type, this one will be a string. And optionally, if you want to enter a description here, you can add that as a description and click create. So if you notice now, favorite color has been added to our list. You can also see here which ones are built in and which ones I've already added to this. Here's our new one. Just to reiterate, collect attributes are filled in the prompts, while application returns claims are what are sent in the token. Now we're going to go back into the sign up, sign in user flow. We're going to go into sign up, sign in. Custom claim, and now the favorite color that we've just added shows up as an option. So let's add it. Now we want to test this user flow. These are the applications registered with B2C. So after initially registering the app, I would select it in this list. Once I select an app from the list, the reply URL is populated based upon the configurations of the application registration. We will talk more about application registration in a bit. So here are the two reply URLs I've configured for this. We're going to select jot.ms and then click Run User Flow. I'm going to sign in with an account I've created. Jot.ms is a way to debug B2C configurations and user flows without integrating it into an app. It's what this whole Run User Flow system does. And specifically, Jot.ms is an external debugging tool that helps debugging Jot tokens. So here this decodes our identity token and also shows us our claims. And here you can see it was issued by Azure AD B2C. This tool is really great because it's not yet connected to any sort of code app, and it's just testing everything we've just set up in the portal. So what if we want to customize our page layouts? On the left side here, we can click on Page Layouts. This gives us the ability to override user experience by using a custom page URI. These page layouts are specific to the flow, which is important to note that this flow, for example, would only be for sign up, sign in. You could change the page layout. Now, there is also a way to customize the overarching experience. For that, we'll want to go back to B2C and click on Company Branding. So if we want to configure company branding, we can click here on Configure. And here's where you would add in, for example, company logos, company colors. This company branding is global and is used throughout all of the user flow layouts. We also have this functionality within B2C of custom policy. So if we go down here to Identity Experience Framework, there's an option here where you can add an XML file, which gives you the ability to extend and have complete control over user flows. So it gives you the ability to edit and extend your user flow. One example situation where you would want to use this custom policy is if you wanted to connect to your own REST API after signup. It's important to note that this is all or none. So when you use this custom policy, IDPs, so identity providers and user flows, are configured via XML. And this would essentially negate and not use any of the stuff we just did with setting up identity providers and user flows. We won't be going into detail today about custom policy, but there is a great wealth of documentation linked to from the portal right here. So going back to B2C, here we can look into conditional access. Conditional access, a bit like it sounds, are policies dependent on if-then conditions. Example use cases where you'd want to use this is if you want to block or grant access from specific locations, which has been a big use lately with a lot of people transitioning to work from home, where their phone on its company Wi-Fi network was previously recognized because it would log in and they would be at work. Now that people are working from a lot of different places, this is a big use case. Another use case is if you are requiring organization managed devices for specific applications. Next, we're going to look into application registration. We create an application registration to allow our client apps to integrate with AD B2C for login, logout, etc. So we're going to look for our app registration. Just going to go back into here, go back into B2C, app registrations. So we're going to go into new registration. Here you can create a name. Call this one new demo app. When you're selecting the supported account types, you need to choose this last type in order to be able to authenticate users with social providers. If you ever forget which one you're using or which one to use, you can click Help Me Choose. And here it gives a little more detailed descriptions. And the last one, it says you must select this to authenticate users with Azure AD B2C user flows. And here is where you would set up the redirect URIs. We mentioned jot.ms as a debugging tool, and here we can add that as a reply URL. Lastly, the permissions. You will need to leave this box checked for use with B2C. And here's where you'd register an application. You could also, in that reply URL section, add localhost, for example, if you want to run your application locally. There are more options here for adding API permissions, which we will not go through now, but feel free to read through the documentation or reach out to me directly for more information on this. So in our app registration, here is our client ID, which is where here are some of the pieces of information we're going to use to connect this to our code sample. So here I have a code sample. This is a sample I've built for React using MSAL against Azure Active Directory B2C. I've created this application first of all to learn more about the technologies myself, but also because React developers are left up to their own devices currently to integrate with MSAL, whereas there is a provided integration of MSAL with Angular. We hope that the product team will soon create a specific version for React, as they have done with Angular. In this sample, tokens are authenticated using the MSAL library, which is the Microsoft Authentication Library, and it enables you to get a token without directly using OAuth libraries. In this file, you can see we have B2C policies, where you can connect some of the B2C policies that we've set up earlier in the portal. It's important to note that in the authorities for this has both the tenant name twice, as well as the user flow name. This one is currently configured to do sign up, sign in, and forgot password. Another important note here is down in the code in the handle error. This is a common pain point for developers, a point of confusion for a lot. This error code, so when an error appears that has this code in it, it means that the user forgot their password. Otherwise, if it's a regular error, then we actually need to catch that error. So it's not really an error when the error message contains this. It just means the user selected forgot password. But this is just the way it's being handled, and you will need to handle it in a code sample where you're using Azure AD B2C. As mentioned, this is configured using MSAL. As mentioned earlier, we're using MSAL to handle the heavy lifting with handling the REST calls with the B2C token endpoints. The redirect URI must be configured in the app registration. The .env file is used for external configurations, so the system knows how to pull it into our codebase. It is used natively in React, which is why I make use of it here. And here we've entered the tenant name, the client ID, which we found in the portal, redirect URI, as I currently have this running locally on my local host. And the MSAL is using some of these variables over here. As mentioned, I have this running locally, so we're going to demo some of these user flows. Here I brought up localhost, where it's currently running. Log in, and here you can sign in with a local account or sign in with a social account. Actually, so we're going to demo. Let's sign in with a social account. Sign in. And now I'm doing multi-factor authentication on my phone through my Gmail. It's important to note that this multi-factor authentication step is through Google, as we did not select the MFA authentication when we were setting up B2C in the portal. So I have it configured. The landing page is just saying hello and then my name. Going to log out, log in again. We also have this forgot password for a local account. So this would throw the error mentioned earlier in the code, and it needs to be handled separately. We also have sign up now, where you can sign up for a local account. Favorite color was what we added earlier, and here's where you can enter it. So again, the fields in the sign up flow are related to what the user selected back in the portal on the left side for collect attributes. Well, for profile edit, the collect attributes section allows the user to edit the information in their profile. Awesome. So now that we've demoed it and now that the presentation is over, I will pop over to Q&A to see if there are any other questions. While I do that, Rebecca from Reactor has a few words for the audience.
Hello, just one moment, please. Thank you. Bearing with me. Yep, just as I mentioned earlier, we have a call to action for all of you in attendance at the moment. If you heard about this event or the reactor by word of mouth, but you're not yet part of our community, please feel free. We encourage you to sign up. We have a meetup page, depending on where you're located. Maybe you're not directly next to one of our physical reactor spaces, but you're within the region. Right now, while we are having all of our events virtual, you definitely can benefit from that. If you know people that live outside, for instance, the reactor where I am is in New York City, but if you happen to live in New Jersey, feel free to join our meetup community group because right now all of our content's virtual. It's great. You can attend whenever. We also have recordings, as I mentioned, on our reactor page, so you can check them out later. But definitely keep up with it. Keep an eye on it. We always have new things popping up that cover an array of developer and tech content. We also have a survey, as I mentioned. If you could be so kind as to fill it out, I will drop the link into the chat momentarily. And the code is there, 11856. Just make sure you enter that if you're submitting the form for that, just so we know which event you're referencing when you're giving us your feedback. If you have questions, now's the time to ask them as well. If you have anything regarding Maggie's presentation, do feel free to drop that into the chat. And yeah, right now it looks like we don't have questions coming in. We can probably give it a little bit longer just because we did just wrap it up. And there is that, as I mentioned before, slight delay in the feed. But I think Maggie did a great job, was really thorough, covering all of the details for getting set up. So perhaps this is a sign that she covered it all and there's no questions. If you do have questions for Maggie down the line, you can reach out to her directly. Maggie, is there a great way to get in touch with you if there happens to be any questions related to the Azure AD B2C content?
Yeah, thank you for listening, and feel free to contact me at marxen@microsoft.com with any questions. Otherwise, through Teams, LinkedIn, it's Maggie Markson.
Awesome. We just got a question in the field over there. If you wanted to take a look at that.
Yes. So the question is, can I set a limited time for the security token to access, just like a storage account is what the question says. I don't have specific information on that right now, but I would be able to look into it and get back to you. Thank you for the question.
Okay, so I think at this time, if there's no additional questions, we will conclude the event. Yeah, thank you again, Maggie. This was wonderful. I really appreciate you coming and giving us your time, putting this presentation together, and really, providing a great opportunity for our community to tune in. And we hope to see more of that in the future. Thank you also to our attendees for taking the time out of their day to join us on this call. Again, if you have any questions, you can either reach out to Maggie directly or you can reach out, contact the Reactor coordinator that's local to you, and we can, field those questions for you. Yeah, thank you. Have a good day, everyone.